to my channel. Alyssa T. Hunter here, aka Brittany. Alyssa T. Hunter is my author name. If you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. I'd like to go over writer's block. So, have you ever experienced writer's block or how to work with multiple characters at a time? Well, today I wanted to go over a little bit about how to get through writer's block, what to do when you feel like you've fallen off the path. Maybe you're not quite in character anymore, and how do you give each character their own unique characteristics and traits and personalities? So I have a lot to work through. I'll try not to talk too fast. I tend to do that quite a bit. So welcome, and I guess we'll just get started. So for me, it's kind of tricky. So just as a person, not just as a writer, but we all go through a different process for thinking and creating and for writing. So I can't speak for anyone else. I can't speak on their behalf, but I can kind of go over what works for me, what I do specifically to maybe get through the murky waters when I'm starting to get a little bit lost, when my characters start falling out of their personal character traits, and when I've noticed that my book is just not staying consistent, or that I'm just really falling off the deep end. So it happens to everybody. So any smart writer or smart author knows that publishing is not the end of the road. It is just the beginning. So we're constantly learning and working and evolving through our writing process and our writing ability, just as much as our characters in our novels are constantly evolving, at least the good characters anyway. So I guess we can start with just characters and why each character should stay consistent, yet at the same time, you want to make sure each character is constantly evolving and growing along the way. So for characters, I think of it personally as like a movie scene, basically. Like, let's say when I'm working on one chapter at a time, I'll make sure that I kind of go over the chapter before, previously, read through that chapter. You want to remember where you left off, maybe important information that has happened, where you see the next chapter going. You should already have a synopsis outlined, a book outline of at least general ideas and, maybe things that you want your characters to work through and different like scenes of the chapter, basically. That helps me. When I sit down to write, it really helps me write and stay motivated and kind of keep a clear head, keep my eye on the goal, is when I think of it in terms as movies. So you're going from one scene to the next, except this one is like a really long, drawn out scene, one chapter at a time. My chapters tend to be anywhere from, well, it's a couple thousand words per chapter. So I try to stick to about 10 to 15 pages on a Word document, double spaced, all just lined correctly and everything. I probably do a couple thousand words, and I usually don't do less than 12 pages in my Word document per chapter. So that's a lot to work through. So it's a scene really drawn out. But if you think about it, when you are writing, you're working with character descriptions, you're working with character personalities and traits and conversations. At the same time, you're working with action and just building the scene and building the character. And so I always read the previous chapters just to make sure that my chapters from one to the next don't get murky. Because it's the worst as a reader. You've probably experienced when you're reading something and all of a sudden you read another chapter or even just a page and it just feels completely foreign, like out of context. And that really, it really sucks. You don't want that to happen as a writer or as a reader. So be really vigilant, pay close attention to the way that you're writing. I recommend reading the previous chapter. So I'm a busy mom. If you don't already know that about me, I'm a mom of 3. I go to school full time. I substitute teach. I'm working on my English language arts degree for education. I'm also taking on homeschooling this year as we move consistently. So until I can ground down, be done with my college, my husband finds a good spot for us just to stay permanently. We're going to homeschool the kids. I already made plenty. I'm in a writer's mind already. I made previous videos on homeschooling, so I won't talk about that too much today. So as a busy mom, I have to put everything down on paper. I have to make a note of everything. So it's the same for me when I'm writing. That's part of my process. I'll read the previous chapter. I'll put parentheses at the top of each new chapter. I'll I'll put little side notes, what happened previously, what I want to happen in this chapter, and what our goal is going forward. So for a chapter, I'll make sure that I'm staying in line with it. Like all those bulletin points that I want to make sure happen sometime in this chapter, I know at least I have somewhere to start. So I'll sit down, I'll start working on a chapter. I'll already know what's happened to characters previously. I'll know maybe what a character just went through, maybe previous conversations that are important that need to be noted, that I need to play off of for the next chapter. So that's my starting point for each chapter. I need to know exactly, what happened previously to know what's going to happen currently. So I'll go through that. I'll start writing. I'll make sure that my characters sound similar. You want to keep character traits the same. So one thing I recommend to do that, it's going to sound creepy, but I promise it's not as creepy as it sounds. Go to a coffee house, go sit down at a restaurant, go sit down at a park, go sit on a park bench or a picnic table, and take a notebook with you and write down character traits maybe that you wanted to have been observant for previously. Like if you notice somebody, talking with somebody and they're getting nervous and they're always scratching their nose because they're nervous, or maybe somebody's getting a little flirty and they're running their hand through their hair and laughing a lot. Just little character traits that make somebody unique or different, or like a nervous tic, or just a habit. And this can be for all ages. It'll give you some good starting points to make your characters different. One of the worst things that can happen to your novel is to have a voice that sounds the same for every single character. So you don't want one character to sound just like the next. You want them to have all of them to have their own individual voice. You want them to be set apart from each other, especially your main characters, to like the quirky best friend or the boyfriend or the stern, father or devil in my book, because it's the devil's daughter who's rebelling against Hell's way of life. So you want to make sure that each character is unique. They have something that sets them apart. Maybe, when someone gets nervous, they bite on their bottom lip, or, someone guards themselves when they start getting really upset. And so they put on this really mean, angry front that's meant to push people away. Either way, you want to make sure all of your characters are different, that they are unique. And a good way to do this, so not only making those notes at a header basically on each chapter, another thing that I do that is my secret that helps keep me on track, keeping my book from becoming murky, is I have a character list that I put next to me when I sit down to write. It'll have the character's name. It'll have what color their hair is, what color their eyes are, what their usual dress is. So if someone is really girly and they wear dresses all the time, or maybe it's a tomboy and she only wears, jeans and a ponytail and never does her makeup. Either way, you will forget these things, especially further on into your novels or your series. When you add more characters, it's easy to kind of mix characters up, even just their personalities. You don't want them all to sound the same. So you want them to have a unique voice that is just them, that you can, a reader picks up the book, they start reading this, and before you mention who said what, like they can already tell who that character is based off of the tone that you gave them. So, and readers will call you out on it. So at the beginning of the book, if I say this, Ace has black hair, jet black hair, and green eyes, readers are going to call me out later if in chapter 5 I say his eyes were as blue as the sky. So you want to make sure that you don't mix your characters, that you stay consistent in their voice, and that cheat sheet that I put next to me on my, whether it's the kitchen table or the kitchen counter, I make sure I have that list with me so that I can remember what characters are what. So my specific book, I really play off of the meaning of names. So for example, like Ace, his real name is Alcander, and the meaning of his name is someone that comes first in everything. So they're always triumphant and they always come first in everything. So that's why I nicknamed him Ace in the book, because Ace is the hellhound, shape-shifting guardian of hell that always comes first in everything. So I make sure I put things like that, especially when it's critical to your book. If it's part of what makes your book different and sets it apart, you really want to stay consistent. And as long as you're consistent with characters, as you evolve and change the characters as your novel progresses, it won't make it feel foreign or out of context at all. It'll blend in smoothly. And a way that I recommend that too is you don't want your characters. Yes, you want them to have the same personalities possibly. You still want them to evolve. You don't want a character to be immature, not know anything, not be experienced at the beginning of your chapter, and have them be just as experienced and immature at the end of your book. You want them to learn because just like in real life, your experiences and what you go through, especially trial and error, and especially if you go through something that's devastating, you can't expect that person to be the same and unaffected. So you want to make sure that your characters are slowly evolving without completely losing a sense of who that character is altogether. And so what is something else I can recommend here? So for characters, I think that's really important, just to stay true to their voice, make sure they evolve and they learn and they grow. I think it's too redundant if they're always the same, if they're always whiny, always falling into the same traps over and over again because they're never learning. So I think that's really important to stay true to that, make sure they evolve, make sure they grow. Yeah, so I think if you stick to that, you will always have a really smooth book. Something else I recommend is for each chapter, so those headers, they're going to be a lifesaver for you. So if you're a writer, you're trying to figure out really how to make your book come together, the glue that holds it together are characters' voices and having a really strong beginning of your chapter. So not to toot my own horn, but I really appreciate, someone had left me a comment. It was on one of my book reviews on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Goodreads, one of those places. And they had left a review and just really commented on my ability to draw people in, not just at the beginning of the book, but each and every chapter. They said every chapter had this hook that just drew me in, that just sucked me into that, just like at the beginning of the book. It just sucked them into it. It held on to them for that entire chapter. And then it was really hard for them to put the book down because, a lot of people like to end it not in the middle of a chapter, but you like to end it when you have to put it down and take a break from one chapter to the next. And they commented on how that was so difficult for them because of my ability to hook them in at the beginning of each and every chapter. You want to have a strong chapter. You want to be able to have that pop. That way, every time they open the book, especially if it's been a couple days have gone by before they picked up the book and read out of it, you want them to, fall in love with the book all over again, get hooked, get sucked in, and just want to hold on to it from the beginning of the chapter to the end. So those headers are going to be a lifesaver for you because if you follow along, especially if you end the last chapter just with a bang or a cliffhanger, you want them to be pulled into the next book. So by having that header and giving yourself a note and reminding yourself what happened in the previous chapter, what you want to happen in this chapter, and where you want to see this chapter go, it will make for a smooth transition from one chapter to the next for you. All right, guys, I hope that I've answered some of your questions. I hope I've helped you work through character a little bit, mainly character personality traits. I know I kind of spoke about that a lot today. If there's something else you want to know about possibly, where to find good names for your book. How do you know character names are fitting for your book style, your genre? That's something I would be interested in making a video about. If you want to know more about the publishing process or finding a literary agent, whether or not you should go small publisher or big publisher, I went with a small publishing house, Muse It Up Publishing from Canada. They're amazing. They're a smaller publishing house. I really got so lucky to find them and for my publisher to take a chance on me. I won't get into the long story about how I came about getting published with them. But I always thought that I wanted a big publisher one day, and then I found Muse It Up Publishing, and I don't think I could go anywhere else. They're so amazing. It's been an experience of a lifetime. The small publishing house has really allowed for my publisher herself to work directly with me, as well as a handful of editors that I have that also work with me. They've taken me under their wing. They've taken the time to edit my work multiple times, and not only just edit it or tell me this is wrong, fix it. They walk me through it, and they've really just helped me to understand, how to make each book better and why we do the things that we do and what can make a novel stronger. And anytime that I've gotten off task and kind of out of context with my voice, they pulled me back in and, have commented, well, this is great, although it's not really fitting for this situation at the time. So I'm still guilty of it. I work on it every day. Being published is not the end of the road. It's just the beginning. We're evolving just as much as our characters are. But I would not be here today if it wasn't for my publisher, Leah, and all of our editors at the Muse It Up Publishing. I love them so much. They're amazing people. If you haven't checked them out, you can go to their website, museituppublishing.com. They have so many wonderful books, so many books daily that are being published. Check them out. Anyway, leave your comment below, ring that bell. Please follow and like my video if you want to see more, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.